Hello, I'm Dan Holt, co-publisher of Courier Life Publications, and I have two special guests with me today. The first guest is someone known throughout the community. That is Kenton Kirby, our editor-in-chief of the Caribbean Life.
Good morning.
And also we have someone else known not only throughout our community, but throughout the United States, the trial attorney Sanford Rubenstein.
Nice to be here.
Okay, I'm glad you could join us. And Mr. Rubenstein, you've had quite a few well-known clients. Can you tell us who some of these clients are?
Well, perhaps the most high-profile case is the case of Adam Louima, the Haitian torture victim here at the 7-0 in Brooklyn. The case was prosecuted by the federal government, continues to be prosecuted. One police officer is doing 30 years in jail. Another was sentenced to 15. That conviction was reversed. However, there'll be a retrial starting June 24th here in Brooklyn. Other police officers pled guilty to crimes related to lying to police officers and investigators. It was perhaps the most horrible example of police brutality in the history of this country. Mr. Louima, we negotiated for him a civil award of $8.75 million and also some equitable relief in that the police union agreed to have a independent counsel available to police officers so that they, if they're witnesses to brutality by their co-officers, have someone they can go to without having to go to a Police Benevolent Association specific criminal lawyer. We hope that what happened to Abner will never happen to anyone else ever again. And we hope that some of the factors involved in his case, for example, in the settlement, not only did the city of New York pay damages, but the PBA, the police union, paid damages. First time in the history of this country, a police union paid damages to a victim of police brutality. We hope as a result of that, other police unions take note and that the whole problem of police brutality is one which hopefully we won't see anymore. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And we still see here in Brooklyn, most recently, a case that was publicized involving a man and a woman living here in Brooklyn who were the victims of a police misconduct. What has to happen is the police have to realize that they will be held accountable when they break the law. They will be held accountable when they do not treat people with respect. And I think that's part of what the whole movement against police brutality tries to do.
Okay, now you've been called the #1 civil rights lawyer in the country. You not only have high-profile cases, we've seen you on the TV quite a few times with the Reverend Al Sharpton. You've taken a lead in the civil rights movement. However, like myself, who believes strongly in civil rights, you're not African American. You're not from a group that's traditionally been as oppressed. How did you first get started in the civil rights movement?
Well, I think we have to go back to when I first started practicing law, which was in a storefront in Bedford-Stuyvesant, which was my first opportunity to work as a law clerk when I was in law school. And from there, I met, as a result of being there, a lot of people coming to this country from Haiti who needed a lawyer for one thing or another. And we specialized in personal injury. I met a Haitian nationalist, a very fiery Haitian nationalist, Wilson Desir, who was a radio announcer at the time, who had the most popular Haitian radio show in Brooklyn. And as you know, I'm sure there's a large population of Haitian Americans here in Brooklyn. And Wilson had come to me. He knew I was serving in the county legislature in Rockland County at the time, a part-time position. And he said, can I help him? Because he wanted observers sent to Haiti. It was the first election when Aristide was running, and they were concerned about fraudulent vote counts. So he wanted to make sure the American government would send observers. Well, I happened to know a congressman at the time, Ben Gilman, a Republican actually, who served on the House Foreign Relations Committee as its a minority head. He ended up being the chairman when the Republicans took control of the House. And I called Gilman up, and Gilman said, of course, bring down the Haitian leaders from Brooklyn. And we got such a reception, not only from him, but at the State Department, because the gentleman who ran the desk, the Haitian desk, Wilson had been writing to for years, never responded. And now he's treating Wilson with respect like a diplomat. Ultimately, observers were sent, and it started a friendship between Wilson and I. When Aristide won the election, he invited me to Haiti. While I didn't make the first inauguration, I did make the second one. But when Aristide came back to power after the coup, he invited me, and I went with him and a group of Haitian businessmen to Haiti for the first time to try to see what we could do to help with the economic development of Haiti. And I think Wilson had a plot there for me to fall in love with Haiti, and I did. The country is a beautiful country, and I started collecting the art, the modern Haitian art, and did work with the government of Haiti and trying to create a Haitian bond and try to create funding to restructure the economy. I was most recently in Haiti for the most recent inauguration of President Aristide as a guest of the president, and see that the country still needs a lot of work and needs a lot of help from the international community. But what always impressed me was the warmth and the friendliness of the Haitian people, which they've always expressed to me when I've been in Haiti.
Okay, now you also do other types of work besides civil rights work.
Yes, for example, we represent the family of a victim of the terrible crash in Queens, which involved a lot of members from the Dominican Republic. And I traveled to the Dominican Republic first with Reverend Sharpton to meet with the political leaders of the country to see how we could help with this terrible tragedy, and then went back to meet with the special three-man council that was established by the president to oversee the lawsuits regarding the crash and brief them as to what was happening with regard to the litigation. We do all sorts of personal injury, from car accidents, the bus accidents, the premises accidents, the medical malpractice. But the civil rights area is one which I personally have a particular interest, because I really believe that it's very important for us to shine a light when it happens, when there is police misconduct on it, and I think that's the best way to eradicate it.
How long have you been practicing as an attorney?
I've been practicing law for 30 years in Brooklyn, and I have a commitment to Brooklyn to stay here. We're downtown now at 16 Court Street, and I have a commitment to Brooklyn. This is where a large segment of our clients are, and this is where we are.
I see you have developed a special relationship with the Reverend Al Sharpton. How has that come about, to the point where he refers to you as his brother?
Well, it's very interesting because initially I had never met Reverend Sharpton. I'm talking about when I first became one of Admiral Louima's lawyers, which was about 5 years ago. But a friend of mine had called me a few days after I was retained and said, "Do you see the Larry King show?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, Larry King had Reverend Sharpton on and the police commissioner, and he was trying to bait Reverend Sharpton to go after the new white lawyer in the case." And Reverend Sharpton said, "You mean Brother Rubenstein?" So obviously Reverend Sharpton knew that I was active in the community with regard particularly to the Haitian community, but also had a very good working relationship with Congressman Towns, for example, Clarence Norman, the county leader in Brooklyn. So he knew who I was. A few weeks later was the march against police brutality, in which tens of thousands of people crossed the Brooklyn Bridge protesting what happened to Admiral Louima. And when I saw Reverend Sharpton at the march, I walked over and introduced myself, and having him call me Brother Rubenstein on Larry King Live, I walked over and said, "Hi, I'm Brother Rubenstein," and he said, "Let's march." And we led the demonstration, and for 3 hours as we walked and marched, he gave me an education with regard to what was happening in police brutality. I had some familiarity with the problem. I'd represented Jacques Camille earlier in the 90s, a Haitian cab driver shot by the police for no reason, got him $1.5 million in damages. The relationship with Reverend Sharpton, though, then perhaps, because I do represent him now, and I am counsel to his exploratory committee, the committee which has been organized to explore his presidential bid in 2004, I think happened when he was jailed for his protest over Vieques. Another coincidence, I happened to be at the airport with him, briefing him, because his schedule is so busy, his time is very valuable. So he said, "Meet me at the airport. I'm headed for Puerto Rico. I have to make this appearance in court on this trespass violation when I protested the bombing of the Navy." He said, "Meet me at the airport and we'll go over the issues that you want to go over." And at the time, the case of Dante Johnson, which I represent, a young man shot by the police in the Bronx, the criminal trial was ongoing. The police officer there was convicted. And when I was there, he said to me, "Maybe you should come with me." And I said, "Rev, I sort of thought you might ask, and I made the reservation." "Okay, come on the plane. You'll be back the next day." Well, I didn't come back the next day because he was in jail in Puerto Rico for about 4 days, and I was there obviously representing him once he was incarcerated, having had local lawyers represent him during the trial, but addressing the world press with regard to what was happening. And when he came back to Brooklyn, and I said, Rev, if you have to do the 90 days, I'm there with you. Well, I meant that, and I was there with him for 90 days, although I got to go home at night, basically from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening, with a few hours during the day to go back to my office to check out how things were going. And I really got to have an opportunity to spend a lot of time with Reverend Sharpton, and I'm very excited about his presidential bid for the Democratic nomination. I think that the Democratic Party has moved too far to the right, and his bid, if he chooses to run, which is a strong possibility, I think will be one in which the Democratic Party will have to address those issues of the progressive movement, which must be addressed, such as on a national level, racial profiling, the issue of police brutality, the issue of how we can get this country to where it should be, where there really is equal opportunity economically for everyone. So it'll be a very interesting race.
Question of reparations is coming up, I think, and it's gaining some momentum. Have you been playing any role in this? I know for the time being that there's one lawyer, Mr. Wareham, who is pretty much been is the lawyer for the first litigant.
Yeah, there also is a group of lawyers, I believe, headed by Ogletree out of Harvard, and my colleague, I think Johnny Cochran, is among that team, pressing a lawsuit as well. I support reparations. How can I, as a Jewish American who supported reparations for those who were families of those who suffered the atrocities of the Nazis, not support reparations here in America? And I do support them.
Now, you're very busy, and I understand that you have many high-profile cases, plus the time with Reverend Sharpton. You must have other people in the law firm.
Well, we do have a law firm. I'm the senior partner. I do most of the high-profile work regarding high-profile cases, but we have a large staff, attorneys and paraprofessionals, about 40, working out of our 16 Court Street office, and we have just about a floor there. And we believe very much in attempting to do the best we can for each client we have, whether it's a client who suffered in a car accident when another car hit him in the rear, or someone who's been involved in a high-profile incident. We try to do the best we can for each client.
So let's say somebody is arrested wrongfully for shoplifting and held by the store detectives.
Well, interesting you mentioned that. One of the first cases I ever got noted by the press was a case in which I first represented a woman from China who had fled communist China and swam to the mainland and was arrested for shoplifting at EJ Corvettes, which was then a big chain of stores in all of New York. And she was actually sexually abused by the security agent. And the security agent was indicted, and ultimately we got a recovery for her for shoplifting. But that's just one of the small examples of the broad spectrum of cases that we do handle.
What would be the first step if somebody feels that they've been wronged or imprisoned or accused or stopped?
Well, I think the first thing to do, either that or if someone's in an accident, the first thing you should do is call your lawyer. I think that's very important. You can reach us at 1-800-447-HURT, which is an easy thing to remember, and that's a 24-hour line. But call your lawyer. If you are arrested by the police, my advice to anyone is don't say anything. Get a lawyer first and consult with a lawyer. If you are in an accident, call a lawyer. I'll never forget a case that came to me purely by coincidence. A gentleman came into my office, and he came with his mother, and his mother had been hurt in an accident. And he said, I have this broken leg, and I'm still wearing this cast, but I didn't bother suing because I didn't think I had a case. Well, the fact of the matter is, he just didn't know what the law was, and he did have a viable cause of action. We ended up representing him and got him a considerable award. And if he hadn't been with his mother, who was in a minor accident, he never would have found out that he did have the right to sue and the right to compensation, and the only form allows money damages. So if you have something happen to you, call a lawyer.
The question of immigration is, as you know, a very current one and very topical for people from the Caribbean and other immigrants. Do you have an immigration component in your office? And what are the you think are the pressing issues right now?
Well, we do immigration through attorneys that we can refer to. So we don't actually do the work in our own office, but we can refer someone to an immigration specialist. I think after 9/11, one of the things that we have to really be concerned with is a far right that's going to attempt to close the doors to this country, and that's wrong. I mean, I'm third generation. My grandparents came here from England and Russia, and I think that what's made our country great is the fact that we do come from all over the world to not only to America, but to come to New York, which I believe is the capital of the world right now, the Athens of its time, so to speak. But I think that we have to be very, very alert with regard to the attempt by the far right to try to close the doors to this country to immigrants, and I think that's wrong.
So I know the Attorney General has been given sweeping powers now as a result of 911, and I think that people have to really sort of kept in a straight line and under the gun in terms of the wiretapping, in terms of the way that people are arrested and held without trial for a long time. Is there any hope that this is any movement to overturn some of this?
Well, I've participated in some demonstrations. I mean, for lawyer-client conversations now to be taped by the government, it just goes against every human rights concept. I mean, people should have the right to have private conversations with their lawyer. I mean, that goes to a basic right that we have, and to start to change those rules. Yeah, I'm against terrorism. I think that we should punish everyone that was involved in what happened 9/11, and that we should take a strong pose with regard to fighting terrorism. Yeah, I'm for that, but not at the price of our civil liberties. And I think you can have both a strong war against terrorism and our civil liberties. You don't have to give up one for the other.
Is the climate better today with the police department in New York City? And do the minorities and those that have been oppressed, and it's not just minorities, because for a while the police department was thought to be out of control throughout all of New York City. Is it a better place as a result of the lawsuits?
Well, one of the questions is, the police officers still believe that they can do with impunity what was done to Abner Louima, and I would hope not. But we still see, I mean, just this past week, it was covered in the media, both print and News TV, right here in Brooklyn, a man and a woman living in two different apartments on the top floor of a brownstone, and the police, with apparently no search warrant for a no-knock warrant, broke down the door of one apartment, took the woman who was naked from bed to spend 2 days in jail, one night, never charged, then released. A man on the same floor was thrown from his bunk bed to the floor by the police, kicked in the back, kneed in the back, handcuffed in a very, very violent way, and then after a few minutes released. No charges pressed against either of them. Honest, law-abiding citizens. This should not happen in this city. It shouldn't happen in this country. So we still have to address the problem of police misconduct on a day-to-day basis.
The Abner Louima case, if we go back to that, seems to be no end to that. In fact, that we have had a resolution to some extent. But then again, it's coming up again where he has to testify. Does he really have to testify, one? And two, what is the possibility of these cops actually getting back into the force or going free?
Well, first of all, on the issue of Abner testifying, yes, he will have to testify. There will be a trial. Officer Schwartz, who was found guilty by 2 juries, will be retried by a 3rd jury with regard to the crime, the civil rights violation of holding Abner Louima down when he was sodomized, and will also have to face perjury charges regarding a grand jury indictment for lying at the last trial at which he did testify. But Abner will testify. He's prepared to testify. He would have preferred to have gone on with his life in Florida and with his family, but he knows that his testimony is important, and he will testify. You had a second part of that question.
Well, it's a question of was there a possibility that 2 cops can get back into the force?
Oh, yeah. That's going to be determined by the police commissioner. And I think it's really important that the community take a strong position with regard to that issue when it comes before the police commissioner. There was talk about them attempting to reapply to become police officers on regular duty again. That was quashed for the moment. Let's see what happens also with regard to whether or not there's any more indictments coming down. Remember, there's still the charge of lying to investigators, both state and federal, that's out there. The federal U.S. attorney has agreed to look at that. The Brooklyn DA has agreed if the federal prosecutor doesn't move forward with an additional indictment to look at the possibility of indictment on state charges. So it's not over till it's over. And until all those police officers who have been brought to justice, who are involved with regard to not only what happened to Adam Lima, but also to alleged cover-ups and alleged lying to state and federal investigators, the case is not over.
So is there the possibility of more indictments? You can imagine in a precinct house at night where a man is being tortured just feet or yards away from the front desk, and it's a precinct with a number of cops. How come that there must be a number of other cops who would have heard and who are pretty
Well,
much
there also were two police officers. One pled guilty. One was convicted of lying to state and federal investigators as a result of the prosecutions in this case. And I think also it's very important for the federal government to get involved in prosecuting these cases. Very hard to get convictions, as Zach Carter, the former U.S. attorney in Brooklyn, said in police brutality cases. Just difficult. And I think that the fact that there was a guilty plea here by Volpe, it exonerated any claims that what happened to Abner, did not happen. Abner was obviously telling the truth about what happened to him. He's a victim and remains a victim. But what we must focus on is trying to do everything we can to stop not only police brutality but also racial profiling in this city.
How can we ensure that the minority voice is heard? The election results, we saw a tremendous smear campaign against Freddie Farrar, and he possibly could have won had he won the primary election against Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg stated in his own words that he probably felt Freddie would have beat him. What can the various communities that have been underrepresented do to have their voice better heard?
Well, I think first of all you have a new city council in which there is a representation of each of the communities in New York City that has the opportunity to take a position on public policy. You also have to realize that in this city there is a very strong effort in the community to be heard presently. And I think the community is heard. And this is one community that has no problem coming out and demonstrating, and they should continue to do that on whatever issue is important. But I think that we have a new police commissioner now, Commissioner Kelly, and I think I did meet with him, with Reverend Sharpton, when there was some talk about the police officers in Louima being returned to the job to present the position of the community with regard to that issue. But I think what has to happen is his commands have to go from the top to the bottom. And until that happens, and until the police officer who interacts, and every police officer who interacts with members of our community understands that it's better for him to tell the truth about what happens when he sees another officer commit police brutality than to either remain silent or try to cover up for him. Because when he does that, his job's on the line, and his career's on the line, and he could be indicted. So I think it has to filter down to the interaction between police officers and members of our community, in which police officers understand that if they see an act of police brutality, they have to report it themselves.
The issue of racial profiling has been pretty much in the forefront across the nation, with New Jersey sort of being in the lead. Are you satisfied that enough efforts are made in New York to ensure that that racial profiling does not rear its head?
Well, there is legislation pending now in Congress with regard to racial profiling, and I think that is our focus. We must work to get that legislation passed nationwide, because racial profiling is not just a problem in New York and New Jersey, it's a problem all over this country, and it has to be stopped.
Now, on the racial profiling, the police department took recent steps to dismantle their street crime unit task force. Do you think this will be a big help as far as civil rights and protection?
Well, there was a lot of criticism of the street crimes unit, and it was that unit that was involved in the shooting of Dante Johnson. I think it's a good thing that it was dismantled. And I think that, well, we want police protection. And we want and we need the protection of the police. We also don't want to be afraid of the police. And one of the things I learned when I first got involved in the Louima case, when I would speak with African American executives who had achieved great success in their life, financial success, they were more afraid of violence against their adolescent sons from police than the common criminal. And they would say to me, my kid's in the street, he looks like everybody else. They don't know he's the son of an important CEO. And he meant the police. And there was a real fear in the community. And that fear has to be diminished, it has to be eliminated, and the only way it can be is if the problem of police brutality is solved and there is no more racial profiling.
And one final wrap-up question: where do you see yourself 3 to 5 years from now?
Well, I tell you, I'm looking forward to 2004. I hope Reverend Sharpton decides to make the run, and I'll be at his side if he does, as his counsel. And I think that that's something that could change America. And I hope he decides to run in the presidential primary.
I just wanted to ask, have you had any involvement with the Amadou Diallo, and where is that right now?
Yeah, one of my colleagues, Tony Gare and Bob Conason, are handling that case. It's presently in the discovery stage, pending in the Bronx, and hopefully within the next year or so it'll come to trial. And we'll have a jury give a verdict with regard to the negligence of the police officers. The burden of proof is different in a criminal case and in a civil case. And let's let a jury hear all the facts of what happened to Amadou Diallo and how he was killed, and if there was negligence on behalf of the police officers who shot him 41 times, 41 shots. Let that go to a jury. I think that then we'll see justice. I hope so.
Can we look forward to that hearing taking place in New York City?
Yeah, that trial will take place in the Bronx. The venue is the Bronx. There's been no motion to change venue. I think any motion to change venue would be too late now. So we would expect the Diallo case to be heard, the civil case, in the Bronx, in Supreme Court, Bronx County.
In closing, one thing I can suggest, like South Africa came to democracy and the end of apartheid through economic boycott, I think that one thing your firm and you personally have done, Sanford, is hit the large institutions in the pocketbook where it really hurts them by recovering these monetary damages. It not only makes the client feel not quite whole, but some type of restitution, but it also sends a clear and present message to the institution that if you don't change, it's going to cost you.
I think that's one of the most important aspects of what we do in the tort bar, by pointing out, shining a light on the negligence which causes people to be injured. We hope it doesn't happen again to others in the same fashion. And right now I'm doing a whole series of cases involving tires that were defective. And hopefully as a result of this litigation, the tire manufacturers will be more careful in the way they manufacture tires. That's what tort litigation is all about. Yes, to get money damages for the victim, but also to try to change society for the better.
Okay, and thank you for your time. And if you could just give the viewers of Caribbean Body Talk your telephone number once again.
We can be reached toll free at 1-800-447-HURT. That's 1-800-447-HURT.
Thank you.